Joining me right now is Texas Congressman, House Financial Services Committee member Lance Gooden. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us. What is the timing on this bill, and how would you assess it? I know that many of your colleagues have said this is not an infrastructure bill because it's only, 20% or 12% focused on real nuts and bolts infrastructure. How do you see it?
Right. Much like the COVID bill, if you recall, only about 10% was actually geared toward fighting the virus. This infrastructure bill is a lot of spending. They're also saying that this is a jobs bill, and I think that they've run into a few roadblocks. They have no Republicans that are for this. They're inviting Republicans over to the White House to discuss it. Then they've got problems such as Jerome Powell, who said on Sunday on 60 Minutes that the economy is really turning around. Nancy Pelosi came out and tried to correct him, I believe, the next day, saying that things weren't really that great. We've seen a positive jobs report come out for May jobs that President Biden has barely talked about. They don't want to admit that things are turning around because that hurts the narrative that we need this jobs infrastructure bill. But Speaker Pelosi has said she'd like to see it passed by July 4th. I'll be surprised if the bill, as they've talked about it so far, and based on what we know, actually gets passed and gets the votes they need. They've also got problems on the left with some of their far-left caucus that wants more. And then they've got their so-called moderate Democrats who won't vote for anything too far left. And they've only got a 3-vote margin after today. The new Louisiana Congresswoman Julia Letlow gets sworn in today at noon. And so that's one less vote that Nancy Pelosi can lose as of noon today.
So what are the chances then that she tries to jam this through reconciliation then? I know that in the next 2 weeks we're also going to get part 2 of this plan, and that part 2 is going to include individual tax increases. My sources are telling me that they're going to announce the top individual rate going back to 39.6%. They're going to have the corporate rate go up to 26 or 28%. Capital gains tax going all the way up to 28%. Dividend rate could nearly double for those making $1 million or more. Capital gains and tax rate and dividend tax could decouple for the first time. Your thoughts on what we're going to see on the second part of this? Because so far all we've got is the corporate rate increase going from 21 to 28%. What are individuals to expect?
Well, I think that they could expect a hike as well. The real juicy bit of this bill won't come out until the end. We'll see this sail through the House potentially if the Speaker can get her votes together, and then all the fat will be added right there at the last minute. And then the final bill that we see will probably be something we get our eyes on for about 2 or 3 hours before the vote. That's typically how things seem to go here. So however bad you think it is today, count on it being much worse when it actually does come up for a vote. But I think it's naive to think that Americans across the country won't see their tax bills go up if this is in fact passed.
Can they jam this through reconciliation? I mean, this all sounds quite disingenuous, Congressman. I mean, frankly, Joe Biden has been talking about unity this and unity that and unity, and yet everything he's done is either through executive order or through party line vote. So where's the unity?
I agree. There was an article that came out just this morning that talked about the 10 senators, the 10 moderate Republicans who are very frustrated because they're used to being important, and they were so impressed when they were wooed at the White House for this corona bill, only to be overrun by the reconciliation process. I think they're going to find that to be the case this time, and so I'm real curious to see how many more trips to the White House some of the moderate senators are going to make, only to realize that they have really no input in this process, much like the rest of us Republicans here in Washington.
Meanwhile, the president continues to call the election voting law in Georgia Jim Crow 2.0, which is absolutely a falsity. Should the president come out and apologize to the American people and correct the record about the Georgia law? Look at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce now, speaking out against the voting rights efforts across the country. It said in a statement yesterday the chamber is deeply troubled by efforts at the state and federal level to enact election law changes on a bipartisan basis. I mean, I would say, yeah, on a federal level, you've got H.R. 1, which many people say is a fraudulent act. Your thoughts on what all of this voting talk is, why it's happening, and who's talking to corporate America? Who's giving these CEOs their information?
Well, you know, I'll remind you, back in September, Leader Kevin McCarthy said he didn't want the U.S. Chamber's endorsement because they had sold out. They helped get so many of these Democrats elected, and now they're surprised that the Democrats that they helped get elected back in November are suddenly pushing this H.R. 1 policy. I'm also curious to know why these airlines and these woke companies that were so outraged in Georgia aren't equally outraged with H.R. 1. They haven't said anything about this bill. So I think the takeaway from this is that airlines and Coca-Cola and other companies need to stick to their products and leave the governing to what the American people want. I saw your segment earlier with 100+ companies signing this letter of outrage about the Georgia law and the Texas law. I think the American people know that they want their elections to be secure. I think that if we actually had some choices and we could walk away from some of these companies, we would. It's difficult to boycott an airline when they're all unified in their opposition to ensuring election integrity. So I'm disappointed in that. But as for the U.S. Chamber, I say, you know, for them to be against a bill that they basically helped get passed by supporting Democrats in November, I would encourage them to their friends and Republicans in the next election cycle.
Congressman, is there anything you and your colleagues can do about any of this, about this radical agenda?
I think encouraging the American people to stay involved. I'm talking in my district about this crisis at the border, about H.R. 1. I think it's important that the American people don't go to sleep and just throw their hands up and give up. We've got another election cycle around the corner. I believe we'll win back the House, and I think we need to continue to put pressure on the president and hold them accountable. All
right, Congressman, we'll be watching. Thanks very much. Good to see you this morning, Lance Gooden.